Well, I've been doing I've been doing this course for a while. So when it says recent work, it's probably 30 years ago. But later work, maybe we should say. I don't remember the exact date, but somewhere in the 80s, this image showed up on the cover of Architecture Aujourd'hui, the leading French architecture magazine. And of course, the magazines have all faded in response to the internet, as they have in other fields. But what's shocking about this? It's neoclassical revival, right? It's a Greek temple front. We stopped doing that. The last one was 1939, the Jefferson Memorial, 1941, the National Gallery of Washington, D.C. And even then, that was after Frank Lloyd Wright had done Falling Waters. So we weren't supposed to be doing this anymore. So it's a Greek temple front. And what do we also notice about it? Right, it's not an accurate Greek. It's a weird Greek temple front. So it's a tiny little beach house with a stupid Greek temple front on it. So at the time, people were thinking in terms of the shrinking of the residential program. Houses were getting smaller. Then they got bigger, and they started building McMansions. And now they don't do McMansions as much as they used to. But here we have the 3 columns in front. These are off center, a little weird. 3 columns in front. And then ground floor, kitchen, living, dining room, stairs up to a small master bedroom and an even tinier guest room. So this is your house on the beach, where you're not in the house, you're out on the beach all day. So, and it's tiny to be affordable. So here's one version of it with these fat columns added onto this little shack. And this one we're going to see in a minute. These columns are actually two-dimensional. They're plywood cutouts. Otherwise they'd be humongous. And Venturi is referring back to an early 19th century architectural theorist who talked about the simple residence being ornamented in various styles. So the idea is you make a simple serviceable building and then you can stick various facades onto it. And that's a theme he's been talking about all along, the decorated shed. Now, this starts looking very weird and arbitrary, but then Venturi reaches into history and makes some references. So here's Henri Labrousse, Bibliothèque Saint-Geneviève, major work of very early modern architecture. What makes this modern? Say again?
The columns were skinny.
Right. So we have these steel columns and, or iron actually. Iron columns and iron vaulting. So it's a pioneering early work of iron architecture. And precast, mass-produced, you churn out the columns, you churn out the arches, and snap them together as you're building it. And that had been already shown to us in 1851, the Crystal Palace, which was all precast cast iron. And he has a thick outer wall, which is getting lost in the light here. But then these columns down the center are very thin. And what's going on is these columns are the proportions they have to be to do their structural job. rather than the proportions of a Greek stone column. Well, here is a student project of Labrouste. Labrouste had won the Prix de Rome, talked about what's the Prix de Rome. So, very first lecture. Say again?
It's the prize, or it's the competition.
Right. In the École des Beaux-Arts, the French architecture school, it was the winning prize for basically the thesis or CAP project. So one student each year would win this prize, and having won the prize, you would go to the chateau of the École, either in Athens or Rome, and you'd spend a year seeing the real thing that you'd studied pictures of in school, the classical buildings, and you would be responsible to do an as-is and restoration drawing of a Greek or Roman ruin. And he's doing this little temple, I don't know what it is, but here's his drawing of the site plan, the plan, its elevation and context, and a close-up elevation. And it's exactly what we're looking at here, a little enclosed space and then a colonnade in front. And Venturi's making a little enclosed space and a colonnade in front. So, there's historical precedent for this. Well, Venturi doesn't get to do one of these, but the office did. So this is one of the associates in Venturi's office was Steve Eisenhower, who happened to have been a classmate of mine. And after finishing Penn, he went on to study a year at Yale, worked for Charles Moore, and then he went to Venturi and spent his career there. Died around 2002. He was a total celebrant of pop culture. So he was a real character. He always had a 10-speed bicycle, even when we were students. He was a photographer. He had a suitcase full of Leica cameras when we were students. And in Venturi's office, among other things, remember I showed you those signs of life and then the images of the suburbs with the backyards, front yards, roads. He would do all that. He'd lay out all the books and stuff like that. So he was a real capable graphics person. He laid out, he's a co-author of and laid out Learning from Las Vegas. I'm going to show you that right now, because I happen to have left it in my, it's a huge book. I mean, it's monster oversized books. And this is the affordable edition. So he did a great book on White Towers, I think. I never tell White Castle from White Tower. The pre-McDonald's hamburger chain. And he did a book of the history of those. And then he did a book on the gaudy motels of the Jersey Shore. Let's see if I find that. Forgetting the name of the town. Let's see how good Google is. Yeah, so in the 50s, they built these hotels. They're just tacky motels. But they had these they'd be called the Hollywood. So here's one called the Caribbean. This is with the lights out. So these images, I'm pretty sure, come from his book. And stuff that we would reject as bad taste, he celebrates in these books. So that's Steve. His father was a famous performer's sound system person. If you're a band, a rock group, and you go to a venue, a hotel, a theater, and they have the Eisenhower system, you plug your, today, flash drive or then disk into their system, and the whole light system works in sequence to your performance because it's all computer programmable. So his father retired and built a beach house on the shore in Connecticut, not too far from Yale, and Eisenhower in the office. So Steve, this is in Steve's resume, but it's also shown in the office resume. So here is what we just saw, the temple front, little Palladian window, these arms coming up, so it's like the steering wheel of a ship. And then the columns are definitely two-dimensional because there's two vertical 4x4s, and then these are just boards nailed onto it. And if this were a better picture, you could see the light through the slats in this view. Here's a window in the living room, and here's the interior. The fireplace is a giant Doric column, and then the whole ceiling is a speaker system. So there are dozens of speakers behind here, and so the whole room looks like you're inside a speaker. Well, taking this idea of our Greek temple stuck on, or a cartoon two-dimensional Greek temple, stuck onto a little beach house, just as the case was with those chairs, where we could have an Egyptian chair, a Greek chair. All the chairs are the same except the backs are cut out a little different and they're painted different. Well, here's a variety of facades we could put on our beach house. We could have Egyptian, we could have another Egyptian, we could have Arabian Nights, we could have Greek, we could have McDonald's. Here's another version of those facades from the magazines. Oh, here's an Art Nouveau. Now, we've got a one-liner here. Let's see how much we can milk it. We make a building that's a totally anonymous, serviceable building, and we paste a facade onto it, okay? Otherwise known as a decorated ship. So Best is, I don't know if they still exist, they're in the South, so we didn't have them in the Northeast. But it's a convenience store like Walmart. And this is not one of the stores, this is a regional office. And this is a group called SITE, S-I-T-E, for Sculpture in the Environment. And it was headed by James Wines, who's still with us. there was last year a 50th anniversary of Complexity and Contradiction. And there were events in New York and Philadelphia that I went to. And James Wines showed up. He's in a wheelchair. He's getting really old. He's a couple of years older than I am. And he worked with two women, Alison Skye and Michelle Stone. So the three of them were psyched. And they were hugely successful. They were so busy. They bought a building in Soho, small one, and had it all staffed up. And then they went out of fashion. But all three of them are still doing this stuff. Now, this is very complicated to build. There's steel rods going through holes through the center of these bricks. But if you're an older person, you might remember that during World War II, the real glue was all taken up by the military. So you had veneer furniture. Like this is a veneer. There's particle board under here, and then there's plastic like Formica on it. But you might have a wood veneer. And it's a very thin piece of quality wood glued onto plywood or particle board. Today it's particle board. But the glue was so cheap, it was basically paste, that they would always be peeling. Put something wet on there, it would bubble. So this is reminding us of that, of the veneer of the facade peeling off. Now, what I'm going to show you next was probably in its day the most photographed and published building, maybe up to then, of all time. Has anybody seen this before? No? It was huge in its day. And so this is a Best store, and again, it's like a Walmart, family convenience shopping. And interestingly, the image is, this is a time when deconstruction was the rage in architectural theory. So this was their contribution to deconstruction. The building is deconstructing. It's falling apart. And the masons refused to do this randomly. They had to make working drawings showing where every stupid brick went. Rather than, why don't you just put concrete in there and throw the bricks at it and then paint it white. Anyway, interestingly, it was literally published in just about every publication in the world that would do anything like this. But progressive architecture refused to publish it. And they said, why won't you publish it? Because it's not functional in the sense that it doesn't contribute anything to the client's needs. You're running your own one-line joke that has nothing to do with the client's needs. Well, what's the client's need? What does Best want? Customers, right. This has double the business of any of their other stores. Daddy, can we go to the store with the wall falling down? Well, they were on a roll. Here's one where every morning a corner of the building pulls out to make the entrance. And at night, it's buried into the sidewalk are monster tracks and steel rollers, and it rolls back in at night. Well, you can just do these, right? You can just churn them out. This doesn't move, but here's the facade tilted up. Here's the facade disintegrated away. There are a bunch more. I couldn't find all the pictures. One of them put a regular store and then about 10 feet away from the wall, a glass wall, and made it a terrarium. You know how you take a fish tank and you grow plants in there. And maybe you even put a cover on it and it's supposed to have a balanced environment. You know, you have frogs in there giving off carbon dioxide and plants making oxygen, and you make a little ecologically balanced environment. And of course, they always fail and everything turns brown. So they had this terrarium with everything in there brown. So I couldn't find that picture. But we're just getting started here. Oh my God! I repainted the parking lot and your car was in there. And of course, all this is deliberate. And they bought old junker cars. They had to put steel pillars in there because people are going to stand on top of these and jump up and down. So the cars underneath are structurally sound to support all this. And now here's the parking lot running over the building. They didn't build this one. This is a model. But if you want to look under, if you go to Google Image and you put in site or site and best or best, you'll find there are more of these. Well, the Museum of Modern Art has occasionally done things that they shouldn't have done. During the 60s, I was curator of a series of environmental shows at the Architectural League of New York, where we would we would make the entire room an interior sculpture. I did one myself, and then I was the curator. And about 10 years later, the Museum of Modern Art hired one of their curator donors to do a show where they got their artists to do their version of our stuff. Why not have our artists? They're the ones who originated it. Well, Museum of Modern Art did a show of best stores where they had their people, you know, the leading figures of the day. So this is Bob Stern. Let's see if we're going to, this is, okay, who can tell me the 5 architects? Eisman, Graves. This is Michael Graves. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Michael Graves, who's got a keystone. This is one of the Silvers, an LA architect. I'm not remembering. And this is a neoclassical architect whose neoclassicism, unlike Graves, is not jokes, it's real neoclassicism. And this is Stanley Tiger, who makes his best a giant suburban house with mannequins of husband and wife at the door. And this is the real entrance that you go in. And again, this is Bob Stearns. Stearns was interesting. Now, Stern very admittedly imitated Venturi. Every time Venturi did something, Stern would do his version. And he did that for years. And so here's Venturi, here's Stern. It's, you know, Greek facade, it's got these ornaments on it. Stern's got the same ornaments. And a little bit different, he puts best in there. And then his columns are these big fat two-dimensional columns that he then cuts out inside to make the profile of a column. And then the head of each column is stuff they sell in the store. So here's an alarm clock. Yeah. See what we got here. Here's a TV. Here's an alarm clock. There's a baby carriage. And they're actually the sequence of your suburban life. So the first one is a wedding ring. The next one's a baby carriage. The next one's a TV. etc. They asked Venturi to contribute to this MoMA exhibit, and he refused. He's always shooting himself in the foot. He always, whenever there's an opportunity, he'll find a way to sabotage it. But Best approached him to do one, and he said, I'm going to show you how it's really done. If you've got to put a thin, applied facade on the building, what's the thinnest facade you can put on it? Paint. So this is actually, I think, some kind of tile work. But it's totally two-dimensional image applied to the store. It's not even stuck on, it's just applied. And this is a whole story here where this is the flower print of the grandmother, of the dress of the grandmother of one of the people who worked in the office. And this became a theme. It's on a lot of their furniture and etc. Now, I'm going to, one of the buildings by I.M. Pei here in New York is see. This is Javits Center, and it's New York's convention center. And interestingly, anybody been there? Does it strike you as big? It's tiny. And major industries cannot have their convention in New York because it's too small. So if you go to Las Vegas, they have, I went once to I was traveling, I'll stop and go to the Consumer Electronics Show, I think CES. And it used to be where they'd show off all the new computers, all the new phones. And I don't think it's as big as it used to be. And Apple never participates because they have their own. But it's, imagine 5 aircraft hangars. The building is the size of an entire block. It's humongous. And then you go out the door, across the street, and there's another one. And another one, 5 of them. That's a serious show. They can't have those shows in New York because there's no place big enough. And then right now they're expanding the Javits Center. But when this was built, I.M. Pei knew that whatever he did, they were going to cut the budget and strip all the architecture. So he made the architecture be the architecture is the interior space frame. There's no way they could take that out of the budget. It's the structure. Now, it was a real headache because what happened is there are these balls, they're about 9 inches in diameter, and they have threaded holes in them. And you screw the struts in them to make the space frame. Well, they were defective, and they just went nuts. But, the result in the end. And now it's a headache because all this is leaking. There's thousands of pieces of glass with joints. The joints have neoprene. The neoprene's now 50 years old, starts to crack, get hard. We architects appreciated this building. Let's see if we get a close-up of the space frame. No close-ups. But anyway, this is what's going. This is what you see in there, and you know, it's flooded with light, and it's this beautiful space frame. See if this gets us any closer. Here are the columns, and then they spread out to support this. Here it is under construction. You can totally disagree with me, but I think they could have built this thing for half as much money if they just made cheap prefab huge trusses instead of this headache space frame. And then Venturi puts a facade on it. The facade being that which works with the street, makes the street wants to be a building, Kahn would say. So remember at the beginning of talking about Venturi, we said this wall has the job of being one of the four walls for this room, but it's also part of the wall for, is that Hall or St. James? St. James. Yeah, Hall becomes St. James right here. Does this facade that I am painting, it's, you know, it shows off, it's my late colleague, here we are, my late colleague, Steve Eisenhower says, most architects design their buildings to look good from across the street with a 35mm perspective correcting lens. In other words, how many people have been to the Bilbao? You all know the building because we've seen the photographs. No one ever goes. Who can afford to go to Spain? And if you go to Spain, you know, you go to Barcelona, you're not going to go to Bilbao, some crummy port city. But we all know the building from the photographs. But buildings actually exist in the real world. Is this building a responsible citizen? Is this building a prima donna sitting on its lot, not relating to anything around it? Or is it a good citizen that works with the rest of the neighborhood? Venturi's approach would be you make a serviceable economic building and then build the facade that does the job for the interior and the exterior that is needed. So we would call IMP's building here a duck, and this Venturi building here is a decorated shed. It's saying we've got, now, when all these architects, including Site, were invited to do best buildings, Best didn't let them touch anything inside. So we know what we're doing inside. We know how to lay out the laundry detergent on the shelf so that people can find it and will buy it. And we know what we're doing inside. You can't touch that. So this is Venturi's contribution to the best issue. Based on this, Venturi was invited to do a new terminal for the Staten Island Ferry. So his perpetual sense of humor, you always catch the later ferry, and then you're worried you're going to be late for work. So he puts this giant clock. You're coming from Staten Island, you're looking at the clock. He's saying, oh shit, I'm going to be 15 minutes late for work. So, and then these are the slips. Didn't get built. But then he did another one where there's the facade is a monster TV screen, a monster flat screen. Now you can make it anything you want. It can continually change. So here are news headlines running across an American flag. I'm not sure what this one is, fish. And that's totally doable today. We see that all over Times Square. Then he does the US Pavilion for an Expo 92 in Spain. I don't think this was built. I'm not sure. Okay, so that's Venturi's games with the playing with the facade. Here's a building. If you're curious, go to the library, look in one of the books on Venturi where he explains what this is about. I don't know what this is going on here. This is Wu Hall in Gordon Wu Hall at Princeton. And all of these are picking up imagery from the campus. It's a whole story of what's going on here and why. I don't know what it is. Anybody know anything about this building? Okay. Here's a project that did get built, not as extensively as he had hoped. This is a map of Washington, D.C. Let's look here. So here's the Capitol. Here's the White House. This is Pennsylvania Avenue. What we're seeing here is right here on Pennsylvania Avenue. So you hear the term Pennsylvania Avenue because it's the two major branches of government, Congress and the presidency, are at two ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. So that's what it's famous for. So this was a decrepit, right here, was a decrepit area being redeveloped. And rather than put the road's going diagonally through or now around here, and they made a square or an urban square out of it. And Venturi got the commission. His design had two things that didn't survive. A model of the Capitol and a model of the White House. And then these slabs, like you see in 2001, that line up an important view that I don't remember what it is. So these slabs got left out, and the models of the Capitol and the White House got reduced to plans. They didn't have the budget for the models. Here's the model of the Capitol and the model of the White House in a model. But they didn't get that. So there's sort of layers of self-referentialness here. Philadelphia has a prominent symphony orchestra, Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra, and they were building a new concert hall. And for a while, Venturi was working on a proposal. He ended up not getting the job, and it went to Raphael Vignoli, who did exactly what Venturi would object to. It's a prima donna. This could be anywhere. This could be in Saudi Arabia. This could be a model sitting on a table in the architect's office. It has nothing to do with its site, nothing to do with Philadelphia, nothing to do with the symphony orchestra. It's just showing off the architectural acrobatics. And on top of that, and I'm not going to blame Vignoli, there are problems with the acoustics. You just never know with a concert hall. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And presumably, the computer modeling of what the acoustics are going to do is getting better and better. I saw a presentation by an acoustical engineer who they have a laboratory, a room maybe twice the size of this, and you sit in there and they say, where do you want to be? You want to be in La Scala in Milan? You want to be in Lincoln Center? They can computer create the acoustics of any music hall, and they can, you put your computer model of what you're designing into their system, and you can hear what it's going to sound like. How good that is, I don't know. So what Venturi does is make a conventional concert hall and then makes a facade that picks up the neighborhood and works with it. And then it's got these musical notes to be sculpted onto the front of the building. Now, Venturi and Denise Scott Brown were married. She's still alive. We just had a memorial for Bob. He died about a year ago. And they have one son, Jim Venturi. And he made a lot of money in tech and is now a filmmaker. He's making a documentary of Bob and Denise, which he's never finished. But some years ago, I got interviewed for it. And Jim tells the story of how Bob shoots himself in the foot. So he's working on this commission. He's working with the board of the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra. And they said, well, you know, it's wonderful that you're Italian because there's such a great Italian operatic tradition. Bob says, yeah, but I'm a Quaker. You didn't have to tell him that. Anyway, he didn't get the job, and this is what they built. Now, late in his career, Venturi did get a fantastic commission. And the Sainsbury wing extension to the National Gallery in London, England. So here's the National Gallery. It's a major museum, a symmetrical neoclassical building. And here is Venturi's edition. So here's the National Gallery. Here's Venturi's edition. Or, then I should be saying, the edition of the firm of Venturi Scott Brown. Now, let me just digress and say something. Does anybody stay for all the credits at the end of a movie? Anybody? It goes on for about 10 minutes. You know, the Tunisian set. Hairdresser, second hairdresser, third assistant hairdresser, fourth assistant hairdresser. It just scrolls by. You go to a gallery and there's an exhibit of the work of Richard Meyer, and there's beautiful, elegant ink on paper drawing, and it says Richard Meyer. How many people worked on that building? Maybe 20, 30. How come in architecture it just says Richard Meyer, and in movies you get 10 minutes of credits? Hollywood has unions. The hairdressers union insists that they get their credit. If you watch old-time movies, movies from the 1930s on TCM in black and white, you'll see that there's maybe less than a tenth as many credits as there are today. Of course, there are bigger teams today because there's hundreds of people working on special effects, doing the explosions and stuff like that. But the unions now insist on it. Well, there was a scene a while back at a Richard Meyer show where some Pratt student was screaming that he had made that drawing. It says Richard Meyer on it. But anyway, in all of Venturi's books, and Venturi and Scott Brown and Eisenhower books, which is that one, when you see their work, it credits everybody who should be credited. They're very careful about that. Other offices just say Richard Meyer. They credit not everybody who worked on it, but they credit appropriately. So we should say the office of Venturi Scott Brown, and maybe a dozen people worked on it. But when I say Venturi, it's short for that. And while Denise had her fingers in everything, she really did more of the urban planning and Bob did more of the architecture. Now there's a story here. Let's jump to here. The National Gallery, for years, here's the neoclassical building. It's been expanded over the decades. And they had this site, this is Trafalgar Square, and they've been wanting to do this addition, and starting in the late 1950s. And there are competitions and proposals, and Miesian glass boxes, Corbusian up on Pilote, Lincoln Center type. And they're so bad, no one's ever even published them. I got these from old newspapers online. But this is a recent competition. Sir Albert looks at the Sunday Times prize winners and makes his own choice. So they're going through these submissions, and Prince Charles, who is an advocate for traditional architecture, hates modern architecture, said of the prize-winning submission, looks like a carbuncle on the nose of an old friend. So that put a stop to this stuff. And they said, we're going to have a competition. It's going to be invited. I think it was 3 architects. And we want something that works with what we have. And Venturi won the competition. Now, Venturi is quick to say this. Okay, here is the cornice line. He picks it up. This is the same molding you see here. These are the same pilasters and capitals that you see here. But this is not a neoclassical building. There's no portico. No neoclassical building has an entrance like this. Um, this is a total Venturi. No clear neoclassical building has a window like this. They do have columns like this. This picks up the columns from the existing building. So, here is Venturi picking up the existing building. And then the galleries are in scale with the existing galleries. See how there are these rooms, center entrance, these rooms with these entrances. He breaks them off center so that it's more interesting. He picks up the main axes of the existing building. So here's the existing building. Here's Venturi's building. Here's the joint, all glass he makes between the two. And here's this axis that he picks up from the main building. And then you can enter here in the ground level. We'll see that in a minute. This is this great stair going up. The main galleries are on the top floor. So here's Venturi's building. These are indicating the skylights. Here's the axis that he keeps from the existing building. All these things that, whether you make this somewhat neoclassical or totally modern, these are things you want to do. You want to respond to this axis. Anybody know who's the architect of the new building at Columbia? Let's see how good Google is. I'm not going to give it enough. Let's see if that's what it is. Whoa! No, that's not it. Whoa! Jesus. Okay. This is going to take a minute, but okay, Bernard Schumi was the dean of the School of Architecture at Columbia, and he did this new building, which is totally modern, lots of glass, ramps running and everything. But then when you I'm not going to knock myself looking out for it, but this part of the building faces onto Broadway, and it works with the existing buildings. See if we get. So, it's totally modern, zipping, zapping, exotic glass, all that kind of stuff. But then he does this. This is part of this building to work with the campus. Let's see if this is it. No. So this is working with the interior campus. This is working with Broadway. This is joining the two of them. It's totally modern, but it's harmonious with what is there. There's a new building by some big name architect that everybody loves. And I'm going to try one more. It's not so new anymore, that's the problem. I don't think this is it. But anyway, no, that's not it. Okay, this is close, this is not it, but this is the Manhattanville campus. They're expanding uptown. That might be it. Hang on, come back. Yeah. Let's see who this is. So this is a New York Times book review review. Of course, they love it. And it is Jose Rafael Mano, whatever. But look what he does. Fine, great. Suppose we totally accept this. These are existing buildings. Could we at least have something in our facade line up with the existing buildings, pick up on it so that they work together? So one of the principles of the Philadelphia School, of which both Kahn and Venturi were part, was your building is existing next to existing buildings, and there will be subsequent buildings added after your building, and it's your job to make all of them, do the best you can, you can't control the subsequent building, to make them all work together to present something harmonious for the neighborhood. Rather than modern architecture, your job is to make the older building look shitty. And then the next architect's job is to make your building look shitty. And then you keep doing this and you wonder why the city looks shitty. So if you look at one more and then we'll get back. We're almost done. And I'm not being critical of this building. It's fine. Could we just have done a few minor little things to make the neighborhood work together rather than make it all about you? And modern architecture's attitude is, the old building is shitty because it's old. Doesn't matter what. And we're only waiting for it to be torn down. And then we can make everything like our new architecture. And of course, the next architect's doing that to you. What was I going to show you? If it comes back to me. I forgot my train of thought here. So here we are again, the existing building. Totally works with Venturi's building, even though he's got totally different kind of openings. He's picking up these molding details. So, top floor galleries, we'll see in a minute. Let's see. Street. So come in here. under the stair, come around, go up this main stair, push the elevators. We can go down. This is the basement level with an auditorium, ground floor level, gift shop, mezzanine level, cafeteria, top level, galleries. The galleries are, here we are in section, basement level with auditorium. Here's the street, ground floor level gift shop, second level, come up the stair to this landing, walk across cafeteria, and then top level galleries. Now, this is kind of tricky, what we're looking at here, but basically, this is, well, I'm not going to try to explain it because you have to see a picture. We'll go back to this. So here we come in. Every wall is different. This wall is all glass in Venturi School. Here's the stair. Here's the gallery. So what's going, oh good, we have another section. So what's going on here is this space tapers in and then wrapped around up here is this glass. So these are light boxes. Sunlight comes in, it's handled, filtered, take out the ultraviolet, and then it's let in to illuminate the gallery from above. And then there's artificial light in here to add to and mix with for at night or cloudy days or whatever. In addition, so those are the galleries. Those influence Kahn's skylights in Yale British Center. In addition, you see something very much like this if you go to the Metropolitan Museum, 19th century European, mostly French. They had originally made big curving walls and amorphous spaces for the 19th century, and it was horrible. And under the influence of this, they redid it. So this has now been very influential on what galleries are doing. In addition, we have something going on here. Well, this one's more clear. This is that main axis I showed you from the older part of the museum. And this is a false perspective. So this arch is up here, and this arch is down here, this arch is smaller. So it makes it look like this is further away. And here's another one, false perspective. Here, the arches are getting smaller, and it makes it look like we're looking at a longer distance. So he plays all these mannerist games with false perspectives, how he handles the classical elements, but extremely handsome, beautifully lit galleries. Anybody been there? The paintings are, what'd you think?
I mean, the paintings are all like amazing, but the space is also like.
Yeah, the paintings are early Renaissance. They're just beautiful. They're like gems.
This is a painting by young Kahn Venturi with the two figures holding hands. It's like pretty famous in the Sainsbury.
Right. Cool. So, concepts addressed. He's using classical elements, but in contemporary architecture. He's advocating that good architecture can be in any style. The question is not, if it's a glass box, it's good. If it's got columns, it's bad. You have good and bad glass boxes. You can have good and bad columns.